Selka was not afraid of spilling the wine. She was afraid it would speak. The royal goblet sat in front of her on a slab of black winter marble, clean enough to reflect the moonstone chandeliers above the feast hall. Selka had washed it 3 times before sunset, once with heated water, once with crushed snow salt, once with her own trembling hands wrapped in linen so no one could claim her cursed skin had touched the king's cup before the feast began. Still, something inside the goblet breathed, not loudly, not like a living creature, like a secret that had learned to survive beneath polished silver. Selka Morren stood behind the serving table in a plain gray dress. Her sleeves rolled past red wrists, her dark hair pinned low and damp from kitchen steam. Around her, the winter hunt feast of Valcairn glittered with wolf fur mantles, antlered banners, silver plates, and noble throats ready to toast. Every lord of the northern packs had come to drink to Alpha King Rhyse Valcairn's strength. That was what made Selka sick. The more they toasted his strength, the weaker his wolf became. She had noticed it first in the cup room, where servants cleaned the royal goblets after each feast. Most cups smelled of wine, meat, perfume, pride. The king's goblet smelled of winter fur and something dying slowly. Each time Selka rinsed it, the water turned gray for one heartbeat, and from the bottom of the basin she heard a wolf breathe as if silver needles were buried in its lungs. No one else heard it. No one else wanted to. The kitchen wolves said Selka's curse made liquid lie. Wine clouded in her hands. Rainwater showed faces behind her shoulder. Broth darkened when she stirred it. They called her bad-blooded, mirror-touched, a girl whose eyes made clean water remember filthy things. So she was kept in the cup room, where cursed hands could scrub cursed vessels, and no noble had to see her. Until tonight, High Cup Warden Sero Malrek had called her out before the full feast. "Let the trembling girl pour," he had said, his voice smooth as cream poured over poison. "If the king's cup remains clean in her hands, all Valcairn may drink without fear." The nobles laughed, because cruelty sounded safer when spoken over music. Selka had not laughed. She had been watching the goblet. Royal wine in Valcairn was never only wine. It remembered every oath spoken before a mouth drank it. That was old cup law, older than the feast hall, older even than the wolf-bone throne. A loyal toast could strengthen a king's beast. A false toast could curdle before it reached his tongue. A broken oath could leave a stain only the next washing revealed. For 6 years, Selka had washed stains no one admitted existed. Tonight, Sero placed the black crystal ewer in her hands. Pour. Selka looked toward the high table. Alpha King Rhyse Valcairn sat beneath a canopy of white wolf pelts, his dark hair loose over a mantle clasped with silver claws. He did not look ill. That was the terrifying part. His face was still carved in royal control, his shoulders broad, his silver-gray eyes cold enough to quiet a room without speech. But Selka saw what the court refused to see. His right hand rested near the goblet, gloved in black leather though the hall was warm. Beneath the glove, his fingers trembled once every time the nobles raised their cups. Behind his chair, his wolf shadow should have stretched large across the carved wall. Instead, it flickered thinly, a white-black shape breathing through pain. Rhyse's Chaza found Selka, not mocking, not pitying, knowing. Her stomach tightened. He knew the toasts were killing him, or at least he knew enough to let her stand here. "You chose me," she whispered. No one should have heard her beneath the harp music and feast murmurs. Rhyse did. His jaw tightened, but he did not answer. Sero smiled. "The king waits." Selka lifted the ewer. Her hands shook, but the wine poured cleanly at first, dark red and rich as spilled garnet. Nobles leaned forward, waiting for her curse to ruin the cup. The first drop struck the bottom of the goblet. The wine shivered, not because of her trembling, because the goblet remembered. A lord at the western table rose, lifting his cup. "To the Alpha King's health." The whole court answered, cups rising like a field of blades. "To his health." The wine in Rhyse's goblet turned silver at the rim. Selka froze. Inside the silver surface, she did not see a hand with poison. She saw the toast. Every raised cup reflected at once, every noble mouth shaping loyalty, every smiling lord pouring obedience into the air. Then the reflection bent deeper. Beneath the table, beneath flesh, beneath royal composure, Rhyse's wolf appeared in the wine. Huge once. Now chained in moonlit dark, white-black fur dulled, ribs moving shallowly. Each noble toast became a silver needle, thin and bright, driving into the wolf's body with every spoken blessing. They had not poisoned the Alpha King in secret. They had toasted him to death in public. Selka staggered back, nearly dropping the ewer. A noblewoman screamed. Sero moved faster than fear. He struck the goblet with the back of his hand, but Rhyse caught his wrist before the silver wine spilled. The entire feast hall went silent except for the faint ring of crystal. Sero's face changed for half a breath. Then he recovered. "Mirror, curse," he said sharply. "She has turned loyalty into accusation." The words rushed through the court like sparks in dry fur. Selka knew how easily they would believe him. It was simpler to blame the cursed girl than to ask why a loyal toast looked like a weapon. Simpler to call her blood false than to admit every noble mouth had just appeared inside the king's dying wolf. Rhyse held Sero's wrist a moment longer, then released him. Selka felt something inside her sink. The king looked at the goblet, then at her. Ask the cup what it remembers. Anger cut through her fear so cleanly she nearly laughed. "You ask," she said. The hall gasped. Sero's eyes sharpened. The servant forgets where she stands. "No," Selka said, though her voice shook. "I remember exactly. Behind the cup, where you put me." Rhyse's expression did not soften. Good. She did not want softness from a man who had made her humiliation useful. "You knew the cup might answer for me," she said. "Yes," Rhyse replied. The single word landed like a public wound. "You let them laugh." "Yes." "You let him place the king's sickness in my hands." "Yes." No excuse. No pretty remorse. Selka hated him a little for the honesty, and more for needing it. Rhyse leaned closer, silver light from the goblet cutting across his face. "If I accused Sero alone, 3 packhouses would call it a royal purge by dawn. If I accused the toasts, every lord would deny his own mouth. I needed the cup to show what my blood could not. So you made my shame the mirror." His eyes held hers. "Yes." Selka looked down at the wine. The image of the wolf flickered. Each time the court breathed, another tiny needle glinted in its fur. Not every noble had known. She felt that in the reflection. Some toasts were merely hollow. Some were greedy. Some were afraid. But hidden among them were words sharpened by deliberate oathcraft, phrases designed to sound loyal while feeding pain into the king's wolf. This was larger than poison. This was ceremony turned into a blade. Sero stepped back toward the feast table. "The cup has shown nothing lawful. Mirror. Blood is forbidden, because it makes fear wear the face of truth. Mirror blood." The word made Selka's skin go cold. Her mother had called it Bazine sickness. Her father had burned every bowl that showed too much. But forbidden gifts did not disappear because families were ashamed of them. They waited, like breath trapped under wine. Selka reached for the goblet. Rhyse did not stop her. The silver surface burned cold against her fingers. She lifted it toward the hall. "Do not ask who poisoned the wine," she whispered. Every chandelier flame leaned toward the cup. "Ask which toast hid the poison." The wine turned white. The goblet cracked in her hands. And inside the silver surface, the Alpha King's dying wolf opened one eye. The Alpha King's wolf did not accuse the wine. It accused the toast. The eye inside the cracked goblet stared through the silver surface, not at Sero's ringed hands, not at the black crystal ewer, not even at the court frozen around the feast tables. It looked at the words still hanging in the air. "To his health." The phrase trembled above the hall like frost caught on a blade. Selka held the goblet with both hands as cold crawled through her fingers. The wolf's eye was enormous inside the cup, white, black, and ancient, veined with pain. It did not plead. Royal wolves did not plead, even when dying. But it watched her as if it had been waiting for someone poor enough to hear what noble mouths had been doing to it. Sero recovered first. "Mirror blood," he said, his voice sharp with disgust. "You see how quickly it perverts loyalty. One cursed serving girl touches a royal cup, and suddenly the court's blessing appears as violence." The word "cursed" moved through the nobles too easily. Selka knew that rhythm. When people were afraid of the truth, they reached for the ugliest name already prepared. Rhyse rose from the royal chair. His black wolf fur mantle shifted over his shoulders, but his gloved hand trembled once beside the goblet. Behind him, his wolf shadow flickered thinly against the carved wall. "No one leaves," he said. Sero bowed. "Majesty, if you seal the hall on the word of a mirror, cursed servant, it will look like fear." Rhyse looked at him. "Then let it look." Selka turned back to the goblet. The poison was not trapped in the wine. It was still in the hall, hidden inside phrases everyone had been trained to call loyalty. "Show the first poisoned toast," she whispered. The silver wine went still. Then frost crawled over the goblet and onto her fingers. Payment. Mirror blood never gave truth freely. It took warmth first, then steadiness, then, if pushed too far, memory. Selka already knew small prices. A voice lost for a day after rainwater showed a liar. A childhood afternoon fading after a basin revealed stolen bread. Rhyse saw the frost. "Take mine." He reached for the goblet. The silver wine recoiled from him so hard the crack in the crystal widened. His wolf shadow snarled, then staggered, as if the rejection had struck its ribs. Selka drew the cup back. "It will not take from you." "Why?" "Because your wolf is already carrying the poison." The answer left her mouth before she knew she had it. The hall heard. So did the wolf inside the goblet. Its silver eye closed once. Not sleep. Agreement. Rhyse's face changed, though only slightly. Pain entered it like a blade entering water. "Then do not pay more than you can survive." Selka laughed once under her breath. "You should have said that before putting me behind your cup." His silence landed between them. "Good. Let it stay ugly." She wrapped her fingers tighter around the goblet and let the frost take them. Cold drove beneath her nails. Her trembling stopped, because feeling left with it. The silver wine brightened, and the feast hall vanished from the surface. Another feast appeared. Not tonight, a month earlier. Rhyse sat at the same table, still proud, still unbent. Sero stood beside him, leading the formal health toast. The court raised cups. "To the king's health," Sero said. The nobles answered, "To his health." Nothing happened at first. Then one old lord at the eastern table added, almost lazily, "Until the wolf is quiet." The words were swallowed by music and clinking crystal, but inside the reflection they became a silver needle and sank into Rhyse's wolf. Selka flinched. The goblet showed another feast. Then another. Not every noble spoke the killing phrase. Some repeated what they were told. Some toasted with empty mouths and frightened eyes. But certain voices always carried the final line. A lord, from the eastern border, a pale woman in a blue fur mantle, two sons of rival packhouses, a temple envoy with white gloves, always after Sero began the blessing, always soft enough to sound harmless. "To the king's health, until the wolf is quiet." Needle after needle entered the royal beast. The cold reached Selka's wrists. Sero's voice cut across the vision. "Convenient. A curse that chooses phrases no one remembers saying." Selka looked up. "They remember." She turned the goblet toward the eastern table. The old lord from the reflection had gone pale. "There," Selka said. Lord Derek rose slowly. "I toasted the king in the words provided by the cup warden. If there is poison in ceremony, let the man who writes ceremony answer." The hall shifted. Sero's smile thinned. So that was the blade under the velvet. The guilty mouths had spoken, but the words had been given to them, some knowingly, some not. If Rhyse accused them all, half the court would fracture into blood feud. If he accused no one, his wolf would die beneath compliments. Selka looked at Sero. "You designed the wording. I preserved tradition. You sharpened it." His eyes hardened. "Little cup rat, do you think truth becomes safer because you saw it in wine?" The wolf inside the goblet opened its eye again. Selka felt it looking deeper, past the repeated feasts, toward the first mouth that had ever spoken the phrase. "No," she whispered. "There was someone before Derek." The silver wine cracked brighter. This time the cold climbed toward her throat. Rhyse noticed. "Selka." She ignored him. "Show the first mouth." The goblet answered with pain. Her voice froze. A final reflection rose inside the wine. A private chamber, moon, wine in a shallow bowl, young Rhyse kneeling beside a white-black wolf whose fur still shone with strength. The beast thrashed against silver restraints, jaws bloody from biting through chains. A woman in healer's gray stood above it, one hand on its head, tears on her face. Rhyse went utterly still. "Thea," he breathed. The oath healer lifted the bowl. "To the king's health," she whispered, "until the wolf is quiet." The goblet showed her face. Not Sero, not a rival lord. The Alpha King's dead oath healer. The court's fear rushed toward the easiest answer. Villain. Traitor. Killer. But the wine did not agree. The reflection widened. The healer's hand trembled over the wolf's head, not with hatred, but grief. Young Rhyse leaned close, whispering to his beast as if love alone could hold it inside its own skin. "This is not poison," Thea whispered. "It is a leash, only until the rage passes, only until he can wake without tearing you apart." Selka understood. The first toast had been a leash placed on a dying wolf to keep it from tearing its king apart. Sero had turned the leash into a noose. The goblet trembled in Selka's frozen hands. Then Thea looked through the silver wine, as if she could see the feast years later. "If this toast is ever spoken by a court instead of a healer," she said, "the wolf will not sleep." The silver surface cracked again. It will forget how to wake. Mercy was the first shape the poison wore. The silver wine held Thea's face inside the goblet, not as a killer, but as a wound that had never closed. Her eyes were red from weeping. One hand rested on the white-black wolf's head in the reflected chamber, trembling with the effort of holding a beast that wanted to tear itself apart from pain. Young Rhyse knelt beside the wolf, one arm torn open, blood dark on his sleeve. He looked less like a king and more like a boy, begging the part of himself with teeth to survive the night. Selka held the cracked goblet with frozen fingers and understood why the wine had shown Thea first. Not because she had betrayed him, because she was where the truth had been changed. Rhyse stared into the cup as if the dead woman had stepped out of a grave. "She saved my wolf after the ashen hunt," he said. A silver boar tore through his shoulder. The wound carried moon rot. He could not sleep. He could not wake. Pain made every touch look like threat. Thea lifted the bowl of moon wine in the memory. "To the king's health," she whispered, "until the wolf is quiet." The wolf's thrashing eased, not deadened. Eased. Selka forced her numb fingers tighter around the goblet. Was it poison when she spoke it? The wine changed. The chamber deepened. Thea poured one drop of moon wine over the wolf's tongue, then pressed her palm to the wound beneath its fur. Silver light threaded through the beast, not like a needle, but like stitches. The phrase wrapped around the wolf's rage and held it still enough for healing to reach the rot. A leash, not a noose. The words had not been meant to silence the wolf forever. They had been meant to keep it from devouring itself while pain made it mad. Sero's voice cut across the feast hall. "There is your answer." The oath healer knew the beast had to be quieted. "I preserved her medicine." Selka looked at him over the glowing cup. Her throat burned cold, but her voice still came. "Medicine does not become stronger because a court repeats it." A flicker crossed Sero's eyes. "Small. Enough." Rhyse turned toward him. "Who ordered the toast into feast law?" Sero bowed. "Your recovery required continuity. The court needed language to bless what Thea began." "Thea used it once," Selka said. "In a sick room, with her hand on the wound." Sero smiled faintly. Servants often confuse context with authority. The insult slid through the hall, but Selka barely felt it. The goblet was pulling at her again. It had shown the healing. Now, it wanted to show the theft. But mirror blood demanded payment, and her hands were already cold to the wrists. Rhyse reached for the cup. The silver wine recoiled before he touched it. Behind him, his thin wolf shadow dropped low, ribs heaving. Selka drew the goblet back. "It will not take from you. Your wolf is part of the wound." His jaw tightened. "If I ask again?" Selka said. "It takes more." Rhyse's eyes fixed on her frozen fingers. "Do not." She almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because he had found the word too late. "You needed public proof," she said. "This is what proof costs when you make a poor girl carry it." The words struck him. Good. A king's regret did not warm frozen hands. Selka looked into the wine. Show who made the healing phrase into court law. The goblet cracked wider. Cold climbed from her wrists to her forearms. Her voice vanished before she could gasp. She opened her mouth, and no sound came. Rhyse stepped forward. Selka raised one numb hand. No. Her fingertips had begun to turn silver, not beautiful, not glowing, but hardening like her body was remembering water. Fear pierced her chest. Mirror blood could show betrayal through liquid touched by royal lips, but pushed too far. It did not only take warmth. It made the body become part of the reflection. The feast hall vanished from the wine. A smaller room appeared, the cup archive beneath the royal kitchens. Shelves of ceremonial goblets lined the walls. Old feast tablets lay open beneath candlelight. Sero stood younger but already elegant, rings bright on his hands. Thea's healing notes spread before him. Thea was there too, alive and pale with exhaustion. "You cannot put this into feast language," she said. "The phrase is a restraint for blood, rage. It must be spoken only by the healer touching the wound." Sero dipped a quill into silver ink. "The court needs reassurance that the king's wolf is stable." "The court does not need to hold his wolf." "No," Sero said softly. "But the kingdom does." Thea reached for the page. Sero caught her wrist. His rings flashed. Not jewels. Oath rings. Each one bore the seal of a pack house. Eastern Border, Northern Temple, Riverfang, Thornmere. Houses that feared Rhyse's beast after the Ashen Hunt. Houses that wanted a king strong enough to wear the crown, but not wild enough to rule without them. Sero smiled down at Thea. A quiet wolf makes a cooperative king. The memory shifted. Thea stood before Rhyse's wolf one final time, tears on her face. If this toast is ever spoken by a court instead of a healer, the wolf will not sleep. It will forget how to wake. Sero stood behind her, listening, learning. The memory snapped back to the feast hall. Selka's voice did not return. She tried to speak, but only breath came. Sero lifted his hands, showing his rings to the court as if they were harmless. "The servant has shown old records without legal witness. A curse can make any memory look like treason." Selka shook her head. Rhyse looked from her frozen throat to the goblet. "Can she answer?" The wine trembled. Selka understood the cost before it came. One more question, and her voice might not return. Still, she lifted the goblet. Rhyse's expression darkened. "Selka." She did not look at him. She shaped the words silently with numb lips. "Show the hand that poured the first court oath." The goblet heard. Silver wine rose above the rim in a thin spiral. The reflection spread into every lifted cup across the feast hall. Noble cups, servant cups, empty cups, the king's cup. Each showed the same image. Sero's ringed hand standing over a row of royal goblets before a feast, pouring a single thread of silver oath into each cup. Not poison, not wine. A binding phrase made liquid, waiting for noble mouths to speak it into power. One by one, the seals on his rings answered the reflection. Eastern Border, Northern Temple, Riverfang, Thornmere. Selka's frozen voice broke free for one breath, thin as cracked ice. Not one traitor. The silver wine flared. A table. Sero looked at the nobles, not for help, but to remind them they had already given it. Then the goblet showed the largest cup in the archive, sealed in black wolfhide and untouched by dust. Inside it, Rhyse's wolf was not the only reflection trapped. Another wolf slept beneath his. Olda, crowned, silent. The wine whispered through Selka's stolen voice. "The first king they quieted was not you." The old wolf did not sleep like a dead thing. It slept like a crown waiting to remember its teeth. The first king they quieted had been waiting beneath every toast. Not in the throne room, not in a tomb, in a cup. The largest goblet in the archive appeared inside every silver reflection in the feast hall, sealed in black wolfhide and marked with a crown sigil, so old half the nobles did not recognize it until their elders went pale. Beneath the surface of that ancient cup, an older wolf slept under Rhyse's dying wolf like a shadow beneath ice. It was massive, darker than winter midnight, with a crown-shaped scar burned into its brow and silver bindings stitched through its muzzle. Selka could not speak. The goblet had taken her voice as payment, and the silence inside her throat felt heavier than any chain. Her fingertips remained silver to the first knuckle, cold and hard, almost translucent where they gripped the cracked cup. She tried to ask what the old wolf was. Only breath came. Rhyse saw it. His face tightened, and something in him turned dangerous in a way that did not belong to politics. He stepped between Selka and the nearest lord who had begun to rise from the eastern table. "Sit down," he said. The lord sat, not because the command was loud, because the king's human voice still held teeth even while his wolf was dying. Sero did not deny the older wolf. He bowed to it. The movement was small, almost reverent. His ringed hand crossed his chest, touching each oath ring in turn. Eastern border, northern temple, Riverfang, Thornmere, the houses whose seals had answered the wine, the houses that had helped pour quiet into royal cups for longer than Rhyse had been alive. "You see a crime," Sero said, "because the cursed girl has taught the wine to show you fear instead of order. What you are witnessing is the Crown-Quieting Rite. It is older than this hall. Older than your father's reign. Older than your rage, Majesty." Rhyse's eyes went cold. "You trapped a king's wolf in a cup. We preserved a kingdom from the appetite of kings." The hall shifted at that. Some nobles looked horrified. Some looked relieved. That was worse. Selka felt the truth settle inside her like frost. Many of them had not known the whole rite, but they had known enough to prefer a quieter king. Enough to toast. Enough to repeat the words. Enough to let ceremony carry what their own hands would not dare hold. Rhyse looked into the silver wine. What happened to the first king? The cup darkened. No answer. Selka felt the old refusal move through the liquid. Royal lips had touched the wine, yes. Royal blood stood beside it, yes. But the mirror blood was hers. The cup would not answer him while his wolf remained part of the wound. Rhyse understood. His jaw flexed once. He looked at Selka. "Can you ask?" She opened her mouth. "Nothing." Sero smiled. "It appears the cup has taken the servant's usefulness." Selka turned toward him slowly. Her voice was gone. Her hands were freezing into silver. But her eyes still worked. And the wine had always known how to read a reflection. She lifted the goblet toward the nearest polished serving tray. Her face appeared in it, pale, furious, voiceless. She moved her lips without sound and let the tray reflect the shape of the question into the wine. "Show what became of the first king." The silver surface trembled. The old crowned wolf opened one eye. A memory rose. Not a feast this time. A throne chamber lit by blue moonfire. A king with iron-gray hair sat upright on the wolf-bone throne, smiling faintly while ambassadors bowed before him. He looked alive, healthy, commanding. His crown sat perfectly. His voice gave judgments. His hand signed treaties. The court around him appeared calm, prosperous, obedient. Then the reflection tilted. Beneath the throne room, in a cup archive older than the one below Valcairn's kitchens, his wolf thrashed inside black wine, muzzle-bound, claws striking uselessly against liquid glass. Each time the human king spoke above, the wolf below grew quieter. Each treaty signed with steady hands drove another silver thread through its body. Selka's stomach turned. The first quieted king had not died. His wolf had been removed from his rule. His human body had gone on wearing the crown, gentler, calmer, easier to guide. A king without his beast, a throne without its teeth. A man alive enough to govern and hollow enough to obey. The memory shifted again. The old king, standing years later before a mirror, touching his own chest as if he knew something should answer from inside. Nothing did. Behind him, Sero's predecessor poured silver oath into a royal cup. Selka looked at Rhyse. He had gone utterly still, not from fear alone. Recognition. This was what waited for him. Not death, not madness, a cleaner punishment. His wolf quieted until the court could keep the king and discard the beast that made him dangerous to control. Sero spread his hands. "You call it cruelty because you worship wildness. But every northern war began with a king whose wolf could not be reasoned with. The rite gives Valcairn rulers who can sit still long enough to keep peace." Rhyse's voice dropped. "Peace for whom?" Sero's gaze flicked across the tables. "Not for help. To remind them they had already given it. Peace for houses that would otherwise burn beneath royal instinct," Sero said. "Peace for borders. Peace for sons who do not wish to die because a king's beast smells insult. Peace for a court that needs a crown more than it needs a wolf." Selka shook her head once. "No. The movement caught Rhyse's attention. She pointed at the old wolf in the cup, then at Rhyse's flickering wolf shadow, then at the noble cups across the hall. Her hands trembled from cold, but the meaning was clear enough. They had not weakened Rhyse to kill him. They had weakened his wolf so the court could keep his crown and silence his beast. Rhyse stepped closer to Sero. How many kings? The wine refused him again. Selka raised the goblet before he could ask her to stop. Her fingers were nearly silver to the second knuckle now. Pain had become distant, which frightened her more than pain itself. She did not need her voice. She breathed onto the wine. The surface clouded. One wolf appeared beneath the old crowned wolf. Then another. Then another. 3, 5, 7. A line of royal beasts sleeping in archive cups, each trapped beneath the rain that had survived them. Some had crown scars. Some had muzzles stitched with oath light. Some still twitched when distant toasts echoed through the hall. Every quieted king had left a wolf behind. Every peaceful reign had drunk from silence. The oldest wolf lifted its head. The silver wine moved without Selka asking. This time, it spoke through the cold in her hands, through the cup, through every goblet still held by trembling nobles. "Do not wake us," the quieted wolves whispered, "unless you can survive what we remember." The warning from the quieted wolves left frost inside every cup. For a moment, no noble dared drink. No lord dared lower his goblet. Even the music had died so completely that Selka could hear the faint crackle of hearthfire and the ragged breath of Rhyse's wolf shadow behind the royal chair. Her own hands had turned silver to the second knuckle. The goblet sat in her grip like a piece of winter torn from a grave. Her voice was gone. Every time she tried to swallow, pain scraped down her throat, but no sound followed. Mirror blood had taken payment, and the court watched her as if her silence proved she had always been less than human. Rhyse saw the look in their eyes. He stepped closer to her, not touching, but placing himself between her and the nearest noble who had begun to rise. "No one reaches for her," he said. Sero's mouth curved. "Protective now, Majesty? After you placed her behind your cup?" The blow landed. Selka felt it. So did Rhyse. His face did not change, but the wolf shadow behind him shuddered as if shame had teeth. He did not defend himself. That mattered more than apology would have. He had used her pain because public proof was the only blade he trusted against civil war, and now everyone could see what that proof had cost. Sero lifted one ringed hand toward the silver reflections. "You heard the old wolves. They themselves warned against waking. The Crown-Quieting Rite is not murder. It is restraint. It keeps kings from becoming beasts and kingdoms from burning beneath royal instinct." A few nobles breathed easier. Selka hated how fast fear could become agreement. Inside the largest archive cup, the old crowned wolf watched them through black wine. Its muzzle remained bound with silver oath thread. Its crown-shaped scar pulsed faintly on its brow, as if every loyal toast spoken in the hall had pressed the mark deeper. Rhyse looked at the old wolf. "What happens if we wake them?" Sero answered first. "You unleash generations of royal hunger, blood debts, border rage, old betrayals. Wolves remember what men agree to forget." Selka stared at him. That was the trick. He was not lying completely. The old wolves did remember. Their memories were dangerous. But danger was not the same as guilt. A blade could kill. It could also cut a noose. Rhyse turned toward Selka. "Can we ask one?" She had no voice, but the goblet still held her reflection. She angled the silver wine toward a polished serving tray and mouthed the question into the mirrored surface. "Which wolf wants to speak first?" The wine darkened. The old crowned wolf did not move. Instead, a lean gray wolf beneath it opened one eye. This one was smaller, scarred across the muzzle, with a crooked crown mark burned over one brow. Silver threads stitched its ribs to the cup that held it. A memory rose from the wine. Snow fell over a narrow bridge. A young king stood there with a rebel child in his arms. Noble warriors shouted for the child's execution. The king's wolf raged inside him, not at the child but at the lord demanding blood. The beast wanted justice. It wanted to tear the guilty man apart. Then a cup warden raised a goblet. "To the king's mercy," the warden whispered, "until the wolf is quiet." The wolf inside the king fell silent. The child lived. So did the guilty lord. The memory shifted. Years passed. The Lord's descendants stood in the feast hall now, wearing Riverfang blue, their faces pale as they watched the silver wine expose the mercy that had become their inheritance. The gray wolf spoke through the cup. I spared him, it said, and they used my mercy to bind my son. The hall tightened. Selka understood then. The Crown-Quieting Rite had not always looked evil from the outside. Sometimes it stopped slaughter. Sometimes it spared children. Sometimes it kept a king from drowning a kingdom in rage. That was how it survived. Not by being false from the beginning, by taking one necessary mercy and teaching powerful men to use it whenever truth became inconvenient. Sero stepped forward. There, even the wolf admits the right preserved life. Selka shook her head. Her silver fingers cracked, and pain flashed through them. Good. Pain meant they were still hers. She pointed first to the gray wolf, then to Sero's rings, then to Rhyse's fading wolf shadow. Rhyse followed the meaning. You did not preserve the right to save lives, he said. You preserved it to decide which lives a king was allowed to value. Sero's calm finally thinned. The crown belongs to the kingdom, Majesty, not to the animal wearing it. Rhyse's eyes went cold. His wolf shadow rose behind him, weak but furious, and every torch in the feast hall leaned away from it. Rhyse took one step toward Sero. Selka caught his sleeve with her silvering fingers. Barely. He stopped. Not because she had strength. Because he had learned, at last, to stop when the person paying the cost asked him to. Selka looked into the goblet again and mouthed another question. What happens if Rhyse wakes his wolf? This time, the cup did not demand more payment. Perhaps she had already given enough. Perhaps the wolves wanted the answer witnessed. The silver surface turned toward Rhyse's wolf shadow. Inside the wine, his white-black wolf lay under hundreds of silver needles made from loyal phrases. If it woke all at once, it would rise starving and half-mad, unable to know which mouths had poisoned it and which had merely repeated words they feared to refuse. It would attack the feast. Guilty blood and frightened blood would look the same. Sero smiled. There is your truth. The vision changed. If Rhyse's wolf remained quieted, his human body would live. He would sit straighter, speak calmer, sign treaties more easily. His wolf shadow would vanish from the wall. One day, a new archive cup would be sealed beneath the kitchens, and Rhyse's wolf would sleep under black wine while the king continued ruling without the part of himself that could still say no. Selka's throat burned. A single broken breath escaped her. Rhyse heard it as if it were a scream. He removed the black glove from his trembling hand. Beneath it, silver veins climbed from wrist to knuckle. The court saw the truth. The toast had been killing him longer than he had admitted. Rhyse held out his bare hand, not to the wine, but to Selka. I will not ask you to carry more alone. She looked at his hand, then at the goblet, then at the wolves trapped beneath every loyal toast. She could not answer with words. So she guided his hand beneath the goblet, letting him share the weight without touching the wine. The cup accepted that, not his blood, his witness. The gray wolf lowered its head. Wake one memory, it said, not one wolf. The feast hall darkened around the silver cup, and inside the wine, the first Crown-Quieting Rite opened like a wound. The wound inside the wine did not bleed red. It bled obedience. Silver light unfolded from the goblet and spread across the feast hall, swallowing marble, fur, candle flame, and every noble face, until the court of Valcairn became another place entirely. Selka felt Rhyse's hand beneath hers, not touching the wine, only sharing the weight of the cup. His palm was hot where hers had gone cold. The contrast hurt. Then the first Crown-Quieting Rite rose around them. An older feast hall appeared, rougher and darker than the one they stood in now. Wolf skulls hung from iron chains. Snow blew through cracked high windows. At the center of the room, a king with iron-gray hair knelt on the floor, both hands pressed against his chest as if something inside him wanted out. His wolf shadow towered behind him, the old crowned wolf. Awake then, not sleeping in wine, not bound beneath black wolf hide. It was enormous, scarred, furious, and crowned not with gold, but with the wild authority of a beast no counsel could flatter. Around the hall, nobles stood with drawn blades. Several were bleeding. One child hid beneath a table with both hands over his ears. A cup warden in white knelt before the old king, holding a goblet. Not Sero, one of his predecessors. Beside him stood 4 lords wearing the same house seals Selka had seen on Sero's rings. Eastern Border, Northern Temple, Riverfang, Thornmere. The old king's wolf snarled at them. The sound shook dust from the rafters. "He will kill us all," one lord said. The cup warden answered, "No. He will kill the men who sold border children to stop a war." The words struck the memory like lightning. Selka looked toward the hiding child. The old crowned wolf was not raging blindly. It remembered a crime. The lords looked at one another, and Selka saw the first shape of the right. Not fear of madness, but fear of being judged by a wolf. No treaty could deceive. The cup warden lifted the goblet to the old king. "Drink, Majesty, quiet the beast, and the kingdom survives the night." The king looked at his wolf. The wolf looked back. For one heartbeat, man and beast understood each other. Then the king drank. The toast began. "To the crown's peace," whispered the lords. "Until the wolf is quiet." The wolf roared. Silver threads rose from the cup and wrapped around its muzzle, ribs, and claws. The old king did not scream. That was worse. He simply went still, eyes emptying by degrees as his wolf was pulled down through the reflection in the wine. The old wolf fought until the last moment. Then the cup swallowed it. The memory shifted. The same king sat days later on the throne, calm and clean, signing a treaty with the men his wolf had wanted to tear apart. The child from beneath the table stood behind him, older by only a few days, but changed forever. The treaty named the stolen children acceptable loss. The wall banners called the king merciful. Selka's stomach turned. The first rite had not saved the kingdom from a mad wolf. It had saved guilty men from a truthful one. The feast hall returned in flickers. Rhyse's face was carved in horror. Sero stood very still, but his eyes were sharp, measuring the damage. "A convenient interpretation," he said. "The servant's blood shows only the wound, not the war that wound prevented." Selka could not answer. Her throat remained frozen. But the goblet was still bright, and her reflection inside it moved even when her mouth could not. She shaped the words against the silver surface. "Show what the quieted king became." The cup obeyed. The old king appeared again, years later. His hair had gone white. His hand signed decrees without shaking. His voice soothed quarrels. His court praised him as the most peaceful ruler Valcairn had ever known. But at night he stood before mirrors and touched his chest. Nothing answered. He walked through kennels, and royal pups lowered their heads from instinctive grief. He sat beside his dying queen and could not howl. He watched his son receive a crown and smiled gently, empty-eyed, while beneath the archive floor the old crowned wolf struck the inside of its cup until black wine rippled. Selka saw the truth more clearly with each image. A quieted king was not peaceful. He was divided. The man above survived by becoming easier to guide, while the wolf below carried every rage, every instinct, every warning the court preferred not to hear. Rhyse's hand tightened beneath the goblet. Not on her, on himself. Sero saw that too. "Majesty, ask yourself whether you want every king ruled by animal memory. Wolves do not understand treaties. Wolves do not understand famine. Wolves do not understand sacrifice." Rhyse's voice came low. "Wolves understand betrayal." A tremor moved through the hall. The old crowned wolf inside the archive cup lifted its head again, its eyes fixed on Rhyse, then on Selka. Selka felt the goblet grow heavier. The next truth wanted another price. No, Rhyse must have felt her hand falter because he shifted closer, taking more of the cup's weight without touching the wine. No more from her. The cup did not reject him this time. It did not accept command. It accepted witness. The silver veins in Rhyse's bare hand brightened. He winced, but did not pull away. The poison phrase had already marked him. Now the memory used those marks as a road. The old crowned wolf spoke through the wine. "Ask why the cup. Wardens kept us." Rhyse looked at Sero. Sero's face had gone pale. Selka turned the goblet toward him. The wine showed the archive beneath the kitchens. Rows of sealed cups. Wolves sleeping under black wine. Cup wardens kneeling before them, not in pity but calculation. Each quieted wolf released a little power into the royal feast rites. A calmer king. A controllable court. A cup law system no noble house could challenge because every house had benefited from it. Then Selka saw something worse. Sero as a young man, kneeling before the old crowned wolf's cup, not afraid, devoted. "You remember too much," young Sero whispered to the sleeping beast. "Teach me how to keep kings useful without letting them become whole." The old wolf did not answer him, but the black wine did. Sero dipped his ringed hand into the cup. When he withdrew it, silver oath clung to each finger. That was the origin of the rings. Not house gifts, not political seals. They were made from sleeping wolves. Rhyse's voice dropped into something deadly. "Your rings." Sero closed his fist. "Tu Lotte." Every ring on his hand began to howl. The sound from Sero's hand was not one howl. It was many wolves trying to fit through 5 rings. The silver bands on his fingers burned white, each seal splitting open along its carved house mark. Eastern Border, Northern Temple, Riverfang, Thornmere. A 5th ring Selka had not seen clearly before, hidden beneath the others, turned black instead of silver. Its mark was not a pack crest. It was a cup, the cup warden's own seal. Sero clenched his fist, but the howls only sharpened. They tore through the feast hall and struck every raised goblet, making the wine inside shiver. Noblemen flinched from their own cups. A lady dropped hers and fell backward as the spilled wine crawled across the floor in silver lines, forming muzzles, eyes, broken chains. Rhyse stepped toward Sero. Selka caught his wrist before he could move too far. Her fingers clicked softly against his skin, half silver and numb. She had no voice, but she still had warning. If Rhyse struck Sero now, the court would call it rage. If his wolf answered the howls, the Crown-Quieting Rite would look justified to everyone afraid of beasts with memory. Rhyse looked at her hand on his wrist, then stopped. The restraint cost him. She saw it in the tightness of his jaw, the way his wolf shadow twisted behind him, desperate to answer the rings. But he stopped. Sero saw it too, and hatred flashed through his calm. "How touching," he said, though the rings still howled around his words. "The cursed girl teaches the king to heal without a toast." Selka's silver fingers tightened. Rhyse did not look away from Sero. "Show the court what is inside the rings." Sero smiled. "Ask your cup, Majesty. It seems to prefer the servant." The insult was bait. Selka knew it. Rhyse knew it now too. He turned to her, not with command, but with the question already shaped in his eyes. She hated that she understood him. Hated more that part of her trusted the pause. She lifted the cracked goblet. The silver wine trembled. Her reflection inside the cup looked pale, voiceless, furious. She mouthed the words into the surface. "Show what his rings are made from." The cup hesitated, then accepted. No frost climbed higher this time. The price did not come from her hands. It came from the howling rings themselves. Silver light tore out of Sero's fingers and spilled into the wine. The memory opened. A chamber beneath the cup archive. Not the archive of goblets, but a lower room carved from black stone, where old wolf bones hung above bowls of silent wine. Sero stood at the center, younger but already dressed in white, with bloodless calm on his face. Before him lay 5 strips of silver hide peeled from reflections, not bodies. Each strip carried the shape of a sleeping wolf's breath. A cup warden elder spoke from the shadows. "House rings bind house fear, but a warden's ring must bind royal refusal." Young Sero lowered his hand. The elder wrapped the first strip around his finger. A wolf screamed somewhere beneath the floor. Selka flinched. Rhyse's bare hand tightened under the goblet. The memory continued. Each ring had been made from something taken from a quieted wolf. Restraint from one, obedience from another, swallowed rage from a third, forgotten warning from a fourth. The black cup ring was made from the worst piece of all, the moment a wolf stopped trying to wake. Sero had worn that on his hand for years. No wonder the wine obeyed him. No wonder feast law bent around him. He was not simply writing poisoned toasts. He carried the quieting inside his skin. The memory shattered. The court returned. But the hall felt smaller now, every noble trapped inside the knowledge of what had guarded their peace. Lord Derek of the Eastern Table sank back into his chair. "My house did not know this," he whispered. Sero turned on him. Your house knew enough to wear safety. Derek went silent. There it was again. Not total guilt. Not total innocence. The middle place where kingdoms survived, by refusing to ask what comfort cost. Selka looked at Rhyse. He was staring at the black cup ring. His wolf shadow had stopped flickering. Not healed. Listening, the old crowned wolf's voice stirred inside the goblet. Break the rings, and the sleeping wolves will remember pain before names. Selka's stomach turned. Rhyse heard it too. What happens then? The silver wine showed it. Rings shattered all at once. Howls exploding through the hall. Sleeping wolves waking in panic. Rhyse's poisoned beast rising with them and tearing blindly toward every mouth that had ever spoken a quieting toast. Guilty and ignorant together. Blood over marble. Civil war before dawn. Sero's smile returned. You see? Control is ugly because truth is uglier. Selka shook her head. Not enough. Rhyse looked at her. One at a time? She nodded. The cup brightened. Accepted. Sero stepped back. For the first time, fear fully touched his face. No, he said. You cannot unmake a right by gentleness. Selka wished she had a voice to answer. She did not need one. She set the goblet on the feast table and reached for the nearest cup, the one Lord Derek had used. Her silver fingers barely obeyed. Rhyse moved to help, then stopped until she gave a small nod. Only then did he steady the base. Together, they tilted Derek's cup toward Sero's eastern ring. The wine inside turned silver. Selka mouthed the question. What did this house buy with quiet? The eastern ring cracked. A memory rose. A border winter, starving villages. Rhyse's predecessor ready to punish the eastern lords for hoarding grain while common packs froze. His wolf had scented the lie. It had wanted justice. The cup warden offered the quieting toast. The king signed a softer decree. The villages survived only because servants smuggled grain afterward. The house kept its lands. Derek covered his face. The eastern ring split open. Not fully. Enough for one trapped howl to become words. Return the grain, debt, the wolf inside the ring said. The hall held still. That was not massacre. Not vengeance. Record. Debt. Rhyse turned to Derek. Will your house answer? Derek looked at Sero, then at the silver cup, then at Selka, whose frozen hands had paid for truth he had inherited. Yes, he whispered. The eastern ring broke into silver dust. No wolf attacked. One sleeping beast beneath the archive cups exhaled. Selka nearly collapsed with relief. Sero's eyes went black with fury. You have no idea what you are loosening. Rhyse stepped beside Selka, not in front of her this time. Then we loosen it with witness. The black cup ring on Sero's hand began to bleed dark wine, and from inside it came Thea's voice. Start with the healer they silenced. Thea's voice did not come from the goblet this time. It came from Sero's black cup ring. The sound was thinner than the silver wine, rougher than memory, and far more dangerous because it had survived inside the hand of the man who stole her warning. Sero went rigid. For the first time all night, he did not look like a priest of feast law or a guardian of the crown. He looked like a man whose own weapon had remembered the person it was made to silence. Rhyse turned slowly. Thea? The black ring bled dark wine down Sero's finger. It did not fall to the floor. It curled around his hand like a living thread, forming the faint outline of a woman's mouth. Not whole, Thea's voice whispered. Not enough to forgive, enough to witness. Selka gripped the edge of the feast table. Her silver fingers had begun to ache with returning pain, each pulse sharp and cruel, but the pain meant her hands were still hers. Her voice remained gone. She could only breathe, watch, and hold the cracked goblet steady, while every noble in the hall leaned toward the ring as if guilt had become music. Sero tried to close his fist. The black wine cut between his fingers. Thea spoke again. He did not kill me when I warned him. He did something worse. Rhyse's face hardened. Show it. The ring did not answer him. It turned toward Selka. Of course, truth still wanted the girl who had already paid. Rhyse saw it and stepped closer, anger flashing across his face. No. Selka lifted one hand before he could continue. The motion was small. Enough. He stopped. She did not want another king deciding what her body could bear, even if the decision sounded protective. She looked into the goblet. then toward Thea's mouth formed from dark wine, and shaped a silent question. "What did he do to you?" The black cup ring split. A memory opened across the feast table. The cup archive appeared again, but darker now, lit only by blue coals and the pale shine of Thea's healing notes scattered over the floor. Thea stood beside the largest archive cup, one hand pressed to her throat, her gray healer's robes torn at the sleeve. Saro faced her with his rings newly formed, each one still wet with silver oath. "You cannot make a court speak a healing restraint," Thea said. "The phrase will change when pride carries it. It will not calm the wolf. It will teach the wolf that obedience is pain." Saro looked almost sorrowful. That made him colder. "You think healing belongs to the wounded," he said. "I think it belongs to the kingdom." Thea reached for the notes. Saro lifted his black cup ring. The archive cup behind him opened. Inside it, the old crowned wolf slept beneath black wine. Its bound muzzle twitched as if dreaming of biting through a throne. Saro dipped 2 fingers into the cup and touched Thea's lips. Her warning stopped in her mouth. Not death. Silence. The memory showed Thea falling to her knees, clutching her throat. Saro took her written warning, trimmed the words, softened them, polished them, until mercy sounded like tradition. Then he sealed the rest of her voice inside the black ring so no feast court would ever hear the cost of repeating the phrase. Back in the hall, the dark wine around Saro's ring trembled. Rhyse's voice came low. "You let me bury her as dead." Saro's expression had regained its shape, but not its ease. She was dead to legal witness. Her body failed weeks later. Grief made you obedient enough not to ask why. The confession struck Rhyse harder than insult. His wolf shadow rose behind him, thin but huge in outline, and the torches bent away from its rage. Selka moved before the beast could. She touched Rhyse's wrist with 2 silver fingers. "Wait." He looked down at her hand, then at her face. The pause returned to him like a blade being set down. He breathed once. The wolf shadow held. Saro noticed, and hatred tightened his mouth. "Careful, Majesty. Let the servant teach you too well, and you will become the quiet king without needing a cup." Selka wanted her voice back just to cut him with it. The goblet warmed faintly in her hand. Not enough to restore her. Enough to answer. The silver wine showed a new image. Thea lying in a narrow room beneath the healer's tower, throat marked by a black ring-shaped bruise, one hand wrapped around a small glass vial. Rain tapped against the window. She was dying, but not empty. She poured a drop of water into the vial, touched it to her lips, and forced one final whisper into the liquid. "If mirror blood ever finds this," Thea breathed. "Do not wake all wolves at once. Do not break all rings at once. A silenced beast returns first as pain. Ask for one debt, one name, one choice." The vial rolled from her hand and disappeared beneath a loose floor stone. Selka started. Thea had left a counter-rite. Not for kings, not for cup wardens. For someone like Selka, someone whose cursed blood could make liquid remember what power wanted drowned. Saro stepped toward the table. "That vial no longer exists." The black cup ring bled harder. "Li." The word did not speak aloud. It flashed in every cup. Rhyse turned to the nearest guard. The healer's tower. Beneath the floor stone by the rain window. "Bring me whatever is hidden there." No one moved. The guards looked toward the noble tables first. Selka saw it. So did Rhyse. Saro smiled. Then Lord Derek stood, pale from the debt already placed on his house. "Go," he said to his own son. "If Riverfang bought silence, Riverfang will not buy more." The young man ran. One choice. Small. Enough to crack the hall's fear. Thea's mouth in the black ring turned toward Selka. Voice returns when truth is carried by more than one throat. Selka swallowed. Pain flared. A sound scraped free. Not a word yet, but close. Rhyse heard it, and his eyes sharpened with something like hope before he buried it. Good. Hope could become another demand if handled poorly. Saro raised his bleeding hand. No more. The remaining rings lit at once. Northern Temple. Riverfang broken. Thornmere. The black cup ring. From each unbroken ring, silver oath spilled into the goblets across the hall. trying to cloud them before Thea's counter-rite could be found. The wine in noble cups darkened, faces blurred, memories began to sink. Selka forced her damaged voice through the cold. One. The room froze. The word tore her throat, but it existed. She pointed at Thea's black ring. One truth first. The cracked goblet answered. The black cup ring split wider, and inside its dark wine, Thea's hidden warning formed in full. But behind the warning, another reflection stirred. Not Thea, not Sero, not Rhyse. A woman in a white temple veil stood over the first archive cup, pressing a royal infant's hand to the black wine. Thea's voice broke. The cup! Warden did not begin this. The veiled woman looked up through the ring, and every wolf in the archive cups lowered its head in fear. The fear of the archive wolves changed the feast hall more than any howl could have. Until that moment, the quieted beasts had sounded wounded, furious, starved of memory. But when the veiled woman appeared inside Sero's black ring, every wolf trapped beneath black wine lowered its head as if an older command had entered the room. Even Rhyse's wolf shadow recoiled behind him, thin ribs pulling inward, muzzle dipping before it could remember pride. Selka felt that fear through the goblet. It was not fear of death. It was fear of being made useful before one was old enough to know its own teeth. The woman in the white temple veil stood over the first archive cup with a royal infant's hand pressed to the black wine. The baby did not cry. That made the memory worse. A small silver thread ran from the wine to the infant's palm, too delicate to look cruel, until Selka saw the wolf shape sleeping beneath the child's skin, curled small and bright, already being taught stillness. Rhyse's face had gone pale. "Whose child?" he asked. The black ring flickered. Thea's voice answered, fragile and bitter. The first prince quieted before he could become king. Sero closed his fist, so hard blood darkened his knuckles. Temple history is outside feast judgment. Selka turned her eyes toward him. Her voice was only a torn thread, but it came. Convenient. The words scraped fire down her throat. Rhyse looked at her quickly. She shook her head before he could tell her to stop. She had spent too much of this night paying for truths other people had hidden. She would choose when silence returned. The veiled woman in the ring lifted her face. Her features remained hidden behind white cloth, but her voice entered every goblet at once. An unquiet wolf makes an ungovernable king. The feast hall answered with a shiver. Not from the present court, from the cups. Old wine remembered that sentence. It had been spoken over generations, polished into doctrine, tucked beneath blessings until no one had to hear how nakedly it hated the royal beast. The memory widened. A temple chamber appeared, circular and windowless, lit by moon bowls filled with black wine. Around the veiled woman stood early cup wardens, temple healers, and pack envoys. Not all looked cruel. That disturbed Selka most. Some looked frightened. Some looked relieved. One young healer was weeping openly as the infant prince's hand touched the cup. The veiled woman spoke again. "We do not kill the wolf. We teach it to wait beneath the crown." The infant's tiny fingers curled. Under his skin, the wolf pup opened one eye. Then the cup took its first breath from him. Rhyse made a sound Selka had never heard from him before. Not anger, not command. Something closer to grief born too late. Sero seized on it. "Now you understand, Majesty. The rite was not invented to harm you. It was built to prevent royal blood from consuming itself. Your line survived because the temple had the courage to restrain what kings call sacred." Rhyse did not look at him. A child cannot consent to a leash. No crown is born consenting to duty. Selka looked into the goblet. The silver wine trembled at the edges of that sentence. Lie mixed with truth. Dangerous, because it wore enough reality to pass through frightened mouths. She shaped another question. Slow, because every syllable hurt. What did the first prince become? The cup hesitated. Then Thea's hidden warning flared in the black ring, guiding the answer through one narrow path instead of flooding the hall with all memory at once. One truth. One name. One choice. The temple chamber dissolved. A young king appeared years later. The same child, grown tall and beautiful in the cold way royal portraits praised. He sat on the wolf-bone throne while lords argued over famine grain, border deaths, and temple taxes. His wolf shadow rested behind him like a pale thing painted on stone. Not dead, trained not to rise. A mother from the lower packs threw herself before the throne, begging justice for sons taken by a noble levy and never returned. The king listened with kind eyes. Too kind. Empty of fury. "We will review the matter," he said. The wolf shadow behind him lifted its head. For a heartbeat, teeth flashed. Then the temple phrase whispered from a cup beside the throne. "To the crown's peace, until the wolf is quiet." The wolf lowered again. The mother was removed. The record called the rain stable. The wine went black. Selka understood the old wolf's warning more clearly now. Waking them would not simply restore anger. It would restore every moment when anger should have protected someone and did not. Every denied plea, every unanswered injustice, every gentle king made gentle at another person's cost. Rhyse looked at the archive cups reflected in the wine. Can the first prince's wolf be asked? The cups recoiled. The black ring hissed. Thea's voice came faintly. Not while the temple veil remains over the first cup. Sero smiled as if the word temple had handed him a fortress. The feast may judge cup wardens. It may judge packhouses. It may even question royal toasts. But old temple veil. Law cannot be opened at a dinner table by a voiceless servant holding a broken cup. Selka's fingers tightened. A dinner table. A voiceless servant. A broken cup. He kept naming smallness as if small things had not already undone him. Rhyse stepped beside her. Then we do not open temple law as king. Sero's eyes narrowed. Rhyse turned toward the hall. Who here has drunk the quieting toast? No one answered. Every cup did. Silver light rose from nearly every goblet in the hall. Noble cups, guard cups, servant cups, even the musicians' cups near the wall. Some bright, some dim, but almost none untouched. Selka started. The rite had not only fed on kings. It had trained the whole court to swallow quiet as loyalty. Rhyse lifted his bare hand, silver veins visible beneath the skin. Then we stand as mouths that carried it. One by one, uneasy figures rose. Lord Derek first, then his son, then a servant near the hearth, then a temple envoy with shaking hands. Not everyone. Enough. Selka felt the goblet warm. Voice returns when truth is carried by more than one throat. Her next breath hurt, but it had sound. Ask, she whispered. The word was small. The feast hall heard it. Together, not cleanly, not bravely, not without fear, the standing witnesses repeated after her. Ask. The black cup ring cracked from base to crown. The veiled woman's memory flickered. For the first time, the infant prince's wolf pup inside the first archive cup lifted its head against the temple veil. Sero shouted, Stop! Too late. The first cup turned in the reflection, revealing the name carved beneath its black wolf-hide seal. Not a king's name, not a prince's, a girl's. Selka read it as her returning voice broke open. Morven Malrik. Sero staggered as if struck. The veiled woman in the ring removed her veil. She had Sero's eyes. And the first wolf ever quieted had belonged to his bloodline. Sero's ring stopped howling because the blood inside them had recognized its first wound. The silence that followed was worse than sound. It spread across the feast hall, through the goblets, under the tables, into every noble throat that had once lifted wine and called obedience peace. Sero stood with his hand half raised, his black cup ring split open, dark wine running down his fingers like old confession. Inside the reflection, the veiled woman's face remained uncovered. Morven Malrek, not a queen, not a king, not a royal heir, a girl from the cup-warden bloodline, standing in a temple chamber generations ago while frightened men built a rite around fear and called it mercy. Her wolf pup had been the first forced beneath black wine, not to save a kingdom from royal madness, but to prove a method before it was used on kings. Selka held the goblet with both hands, her silver fingers aching as warmth fought its way back through them. Her voice had returned only in torn pieces, but enough remained to cut. You tested it on your own blood, she whispered. Sero's face was pale, but his pride did not break. My house gave the first sacrifice. No, Selka said. Your house made the first victim and called that sacrifice. The black ring cracked wider. Morwen's memory moved. The temple chamber deepened in the silver wine. Young Morwen stood before the first archive cup, no older than 12, her dark hair unbound, her hands clenched at her sides. Around her, cup wardens and temple elders argued in low voices. They spoke of unstable wolves, dangerous kings, border wars, royal hunger. But Morwen looked only at the cup. Inside it, her wolf pup pressed tiny paws against the black wine from within. It had already been taken. Morwen opened her mouth to scream. No sound came. A temple elder touched her throat and said, "A quiet witness makes cleaner law." Selka's own damaged throat burned in answer. Rhyse saw the pain cross her face and stepped closer, but did not touch until she turned the goblet slightly toward him. Only then did he steady its base. He was learning the shape of permission too late, but he was learning. Sero stared at Morwen's reflection. She became the founder of our order. The wine answered before Selka could. Founder recorded after wolf removal. Consent, absent. Voice sealed. The words appeared across every goblet in the hall. A shudder went through the cup warden's face. For the first time, Sero looked less like a man defending law and more like a son discovering the grave beneath his inheritance. Then he hardened again. "If we undo this," he said, voice low, "every quieted wolf returns through bloodlines that no longer know how to bear them. Malrek, Valcairn, Riverfang, Thornmere. You think truth is kind because it burns clean. It is not. It will maim the living for crimes the dead made useful." Selka looked at the archive cups, at the old wolves waiting under black wine, at Rhyse's fading wolf shadow, and the nobles who had risen as unwilling witnesses. "Then we do not undo it all at once." The cracked goblet warmed in her hands. Rhyse turned toward the hall. One truth, one debt, one choice. The words did not belong to him alone. They came from Thea's warning, from Selka's blood, from the wolves who had asked not to be awakened without witness. This time, when the king spoke, he did not command the rite open. He gave the court a rule it could answer or refuse. Selka lifted the cup toward Morwen's reflection. "Do you want your wolf named?" The hall held its breath. Morwen's image trembled. For a moment she looked like the child in the temple again, voiceless, furious, terrified. Then the dark wine around her shifted, and the wolf pup beneath it opened both eyes. Not wild, not murderous, awake enough to choose. Morwen nodded. The first archive cup split, not shattered, opened. A thin silver breath rose from the black wine and entered the reflection of the girl who had lost it. Morwen gasped without sound. Her hand flew to her chest. The wolf pup climbed from the cup as a small silver shadow and stood beside her feet, shaking. Every ring on Sero's hand went dark. The cup warden dropped to one knee. Not in worship, under weight. The authority of his order had rested on a lie older than its name. Now the lie had a witness, and the witness had chosen to be named. Rhyse looked at Sero. "Your office is ended." Sero laughed once, hoarse and broken. "By whose law?" Selka answered before Rhyse could. "By the cups." The silver wine flared. Every goblet repeated the judgment. Cup law broken by stolen voice. Feast authority suspended until every quieted wolf is asked. Sero's white robes turned gray where the wine light touched them. His rings loosened and fell one by one onto the marble. Eastern border. Northern temple. Thornmere. The black cup ring landed last and split into two halves, spilling Thea's final hidden warning across the floor like moonlit ink. Do not let healing become obedience. Rhyse picked up no ring. He reached for no crown. Instead, he removed the royal goblet from Selka's frozen hands and set it on the table between them, where everyone could see the crack running through its side. "I used her pain to expose yours," he said to the hall. "That does not make me clean." Selka looked at him. "Good. Let him say it where they could hear." Rhyse turned to her. "I cannot return what the cup took from you." "No," Selka said, her voice rough but hers. "You cannot." The words hurt him. "They should." He bowed his head once. "Then I will start by not taking the next choice." Behind him, his wolf shadow lifted its head. The silver needle still pierced its body, but several had loosened. Not enough to heal. Enough to breathe. Selka looked into the royal goblet. Does your wolf want one memory awake? Rhyse did not answer for it. The white-black wolf inside the wine opened its eye. A single needle dissolved. The beast exhaled. Not free. Not quieted. Present. Across the hall, the nobles lowered their cups one by one. Some in shame, some in fear, some because their hands could no longer pretend wine was only wine. Lord Derek knelt first, not before Rhyse, but before the silver debt his house owed. Others followed slowly, unevenly, no longer united by loyalty, but exposed by it. Selka turned towards Sero. His face was empty with defeat and rage. She did not ask for his death. Death would be too simple for a man who had made silence hereditary. Put him in the cup archive, she said, not sealed, not quieted, listening. Every wolf decides whether he hears its memory. Sero flinched. Rhyse looked to the guards. Do it. This time, when they moved, they did not look first to the noble tables. Dawn had not yet reached the windows, but the feast hall no longer belonged to night. The goblets remained on the tables, silver at their rims, each holding a question instead of a weapon. The old crowned wolves beneath the archive did not wake all at once. They waited. Selka's hands were still partly silver. Her voice was damaged. Her curse had not become pretty just because the court needed it. But when she looked into the cracked royal goblet, the wine reflected her face clearly for the first time in her life. Behind her, Rhyse stood close enough to guard, far enough not to claim. What do you want done with the first toast? He asked. Selka looked at the cup, the wolves, the frightened court, and the faint breath of the king's beast returning one memory at a time. Do not erase it, she said. Mark it. The wine accepted. Mercy, once stolen, became poison. Witnessed, it may become mercy again. Selka set the goblet down, and for the first time the wine stayed silent because it had been heard.